Good evening, you're watching AWANI Tonight with me, Faye Kwan. The classification of the top 15% income group, which will be excluded from the proposed targeted RON95 petrol subsidy, is expected to be announced by mid-2025, says Economy Minister Rafizi Ramli. Individuals excluded from receiving subsidies would also have the opportunity to appeal the decision.
He says there is an appeal mechanism which will be in place before the targeted subsidy is rolled out at petrol stations. The Finance Ministry has previously indicated a two-tier pricing mechanism where subsidized prices will be displayed at retail stations for eligible recipients, while those not eligible will pay the market price. Rafizi added the restructuring could save the government 5 to 6 billion ringgit annually, assuming crude oil prices average $75 per barrel in 2025.
A decision on whether former Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib Razak can serve the remainder of his prison sentence under house arrest lies solely in the hands of the King. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim also says the case would be decided by the Court of Appeal on January 6 next year.
Saya boleh jawab. Bagi masa lepas mahkamah, saya akan bawa datang sini untuk jawab. Saya yang bawa kes pengampunan itu untuk dimasukkan dalam agenda. Tidak dimasukkan. Ya, boleh tanya yang Pertuan Agong. Saya masukkan sebab apa? Saya rasa harus diberi pertimbangan. Baik, sang Jose addendum. Kita tak boleh jawab. Kerana kes itu melibatkan Pertuan Agong dan lembaga pengampunan. Pengurusinya Pertuan Agong.
He was responding to a question from Perikatan's Datuk Seri Taqiyuddin Hassan on the royal addendum involving Najib's pardon application. Najib, who was Prime Minister between 2009 and 2018, was sentenced to 12 years in prison in August 2022 for a corruption case linked to 1MDB. The sentence, however, was halved by a pardons board chaired by former King Al Sultan Abdullah shortly before ending his reign in January. The government will not tolerate drastic hikes in medical insurance premiums, says Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. The Prime Minister says Bank Negara Malaysia and the Health Ministry are developing interim measures to regulate the planned increases in premiums next year.
Kita faham ada sedikit peningkatan dengan kemundasabahan alasan yang diberikan, tetapi harus dikawal dan ini maklumat terakhir oleh Bank Negara dan Kementerian Kesihatan ialah bahawa mereka akan menentukan ada kawalan supaya kenaikan itu tidak akan terlalu tinggi kerana menimbulkan banyak masalah kepada pesakit dan masalah kepada peningkatan inflasi.
Insurance firms are reportedly planning to raise medical premiums by 40 to 70%, citing rising healthcare costs. Anwar said the government intended to terminate its contracts with certain companies to tackle what he referred to as a long-standing supply monopoly. He also directed the Health Ministry to source more affordable generic medicines. Meanwhile, Health Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad said his ministry was open to proposals to establish a joint task force to address the issue.
Former Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad says the Royal Commission of Inquiry, or RCI, into Batu Putih was politically motivated. In a press conference today, the former Prime Minister rejected the findings and welcomed a criminal investigation against him, calling it an opportunity to clear his name.
Nak buat criminal investigation, they are welcome to do that because I have been very careful about my behavior throughout the 22 years I was Prime Minister. Even the accusation that I stole money from the government, until now Anwar has not been able to prove even 1 cent being stolen by me.
Mahathir said the move not to proceed with Malaysia's application to review the International Court of Justice's decision to award Batu Putih to Singapore was a good decision and stressed it was made by the cabinet and not him alone. He also called out former ministers who sat in the cabinet at the time, some of who are still ministers today, questioning their silence when he brought the matter to the cabinet. Mahathir also pushed back against allegations of treachery made by Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, saying he derived no personal benefit from the decision and asked how his actions could be seen as betrayal.
From a surge in SOSMA detentions to increasing restrictions on freedom of assembly, Janelle Tan from Suara Rakyat Malaysia highlights some troubling trends and challenges facing human rights in Malaysia.
We're looking at this year a resurgence in terrorism-related detentions under SOSMA, which is the Security Offences Special Measures Act 2012. And concurrently, we also saw a drastic increase in the number of organised crime-related detentions. In fact, from 11 people last year to 107. So let's say last year, for example, for organised crime, we're only looking at the arrest of 11 members of a drug syndicate. Even that was also an overreach, because prior to this, the government did not use SOSMA against drug syndicate members. For the majority of cases that we saw this year, the police actually, one, they used the normal remand first to arrest these individuals and investigate. After that, they go on to rearrest these individuals under SOSMA. And our long-standing argument for this is that you do not need to do this actually, because the investigation from remand will afford you enough time. In terms of Section 233, we've seen actually an increase in its use in investigating 3R cases, if I'm not mistaken, by 20-30%. What's consistent from last year is that where religion, race, or royalty is concerned, they will tend to also snag in things like Sedition Act, of course, where relevant, and of course relevant provisions of Penal Code, like Sections 504, Sections 505, and where quote-unquote defamation is concerned, and this we especially see in content quote-unquote defaming royal members, or let's say certain high-ranking public authorities, they will also throw in Section 500. So you can see this consistent trend of a host of laws being used as legal arsenal to curtail content, and the government has admitted to this in the importance of using not just Sedition Act but also Communications Multimedia Act, and also certain parts of the Penal Code to actually crack down on content like this.
Janelle also highlights that out of 68 overall public assemblies this year, over a third of them were investigated.
Out of the number of investigated assemblies, 48% of them are actually pro-Palestine solidarity demonstrations, which tells you that as much as certain people like the Home Minister himself said that the government respects the right to assembly and facilitates them even, we all know that whenever you try to investigate assemblies, you're actually conveying a message to the public that you shouldn't really be assembling. Rather, it has a chilling effect on the exercise of that freedom. So in that sense, this statistic is very concerning. And also the number of arrests of individuals have gone up by 60%. Number of overall investigations of individuals have gone up by more than 50%. And of course, the Kami Mau Ai rally is very emblematic of the arrest because we're talking about the Malaysian teacher and also the 8 stateless youths, including 3 minors.
Janelle also highlights some of the reforms and key measures to take in order to improve the human rights landscape in the country.
To make all data open and accessible. By that, I mean deaths in custody, arrest, charges, and convictions under the key laws, are security laws, freedom of expression laws, etc. So that's one. Second is delay don't continue tabling the current Communication and Multimedia Act amendments, because that's already in there. So stop the tabling and pull it out and consult with civil society, because the amendments really entail a severe overreach of MCMC's powers. And it will really lead to severe censorship, not just of civilians, but also the media themselves. Third is kickstart consultations, or actually I'll have 2 more. Kickstart consultations to amend the procedures related to peaceful assemblies and include civil society as a key stakeholder, not just the police. Lastly, for SOSMA amendments, because the engagements were done, because the findings are there, review it. And make sure that the SOSMA amendments pertaining to the right to fair trial concerns that were raised by us, make sure that they're tabled in Parliament next year, ASAP. Yeah.
We'll be back with more after the break.
Rambut gugur lagi? Macam mana Gunakan Pantene baharu dengan provitamin mikro yang meresap dan menguatkan rambut dari dalam. Rambut 10 kali lebih kuat terhadap rambut gugur. Pantene baharu.
Shopee $12. Dijamin harga rendah di Shopee. Shop Shopee. Shop Shopee. 15 juta ringgit voucher Shopee Live. Shop Shopee. Beli sekarang.
Kerap menggaru kulit kepala disebabkan kelumumut, masalahnya lebih mendalam. Gunalah Head & Shoulders baru, menembusi 5 lapisan untuk membasmi kelumumut dan kegatalan. Bebas kelumumut sehingga 100%. Head & Shoulders baru.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. A 26-year-old man has been charged with the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, who was fatally shot last Wednesday in New York City. The suspect, Luigi Mangione, was arrested on Monday at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania after being recognized by a customer. The murder of Thompson triggered a massive manhunt. United Healthcare is the largest insurer in the US. Authorities say Mangione was found with a 3D printed pistol, a loaded Glock magazine, and a 3D printed silencer in his backpack. They also found a 3-page handwritten document that showed he had strong negative feelings towards corporate America, condemning healthcare companies for prioritizing profits over care. He is currently in jail in Pennsylvania, pending his extradition to New York. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu takes the stand in court today, facing charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust in 3 separate corruption cases. He has repeatedly requested to delay his testimony because of the conflicts roiling the Middle East, but was mostly denied by the courts. Netanyahu is the first sitting Prime Minister of Israel to face a criminal trial. Prosecutors accuse him of accepting expensive gifts, including cigars and champagne, from a billionaire Hollywood producer in exchange for personal and business favors. He's also accused of pushing regulations to benefit media moguls in return for positive coverage of himself and his family. Netanyahu has denied the charges, calling them a witch hunt orchestrated by political opponents. The long-standing trial comes as Netanyahu faces growing criticism at home over his handling of the war in Gaza. Opponents say he's delaying a potential ceasefire that could secure the release of around 100 hostages held by Hamas since the October 7th attack. The International Federation of Journalists, or IFJ, has called 2024 a particularly deadly year for journalists. At least 104 were killed worldwide, with over half of them being in Gaza. The toll for 2024 is down from the 129 deaths in 2023. In Gaza, 55 Palestinian journalists were killed this year, out of a total 138 since the start of the Israel offensive in Gaza on October 7, 2023. The IFJ said many journalists were deliberately targeted, while others were victims of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Asia was the second deadliest region for journalists, with 20 killed, including 6 in Pakistan, 5 in Bangladesh, and 3 in India. While in Europe, the ongoing war in Ukraine claimed the lives of 4 journalists in 2024. The IFJ also said 520 journalists globally were in prison, up from 427 last year. China was the worst offender, detaining at least 135 reporters, including mass jailing in Hong Kong. That wraps up AWANI Tonight. Check out our web portal, keeping you informed on the critical events shaping our world, all in one place at international.astroawani.com. That's all for now. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.